striving to become a scientist to now becoming a successful YouTuber and entrepreneur and making a vocation out of his failures. I'm talking about Ankur Warikoo, who's with us right here in our studios. Thank you so much for taking time out and joining in.
Thank you for having me, Avanne. Thank you.
So, Ankur, it's not a very conventional journey that you've taken, and there have been a lot of failures and bumps along the way, but you said, you know what, I'll take it in my stride and I'll make something out of it. How did it all happen? Take us back in time.
It's been a wonderful journey, firstly. Thank you for acknowledging that. As I was mentioning right before we started, I was the one with the plan. I had my life exactly sorted out. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, which was to become a scientist, go to the US, get a PhD degree, and I was on track to doing all of that.
Proud Indian parents, they must have been so happy.
Exactly, like, sab kuch badal jayega, and sab dunya set ho jayegi, and so on. And I frankly believed that.
Yeah.
I was in awe of the spaces and the sciences of it. I wanted to become a NASA scientist and went to the US, was in my PhD program, and then realized that's not what makes me happy. And it was frankly a very unsettling revelation, because all your life you've been just thinking of doing that, and it hits you that that's not what you want to do. So I came back to India. I was completely confused what to do, and my friends were like, "You're confused, so why don't you do what most confused people do? Go get an MBA." I then joined the Indian School of Business, which is only a 5-year-old school back then, so nearly not the repute that it has today. But it was a fantastic call, and I loved my time there.
Okay.
Then became a consultant, and serendipitously in 2009, I'm meeting a friend of mine from business school. He spoke about a startup that he just started called secondshadi.com. And he asked me whether I wanted to help him on that. I absolutely leapt at that opportunity and haven't looked back since then.
Oh wow, that's pretty interesting, because you know, you've entered this world of entrepreneurship, and at least you were fortunate enough to realize what doesn't make you happy. You shifted paths. But let's talk about the businesses as well that you ran. There was secondshadi.com as well, Gaadi.com, and then Groupon. How did that work out?
It was a fascinating journey. So 2009 was not the time.
Because not all of them succeeded.
Oh, they did. They did. In fact, none of them in that sense.
I was being polite.
Depending on, I have a fascinating take on that, though.
Okay.
But 2009 was not the time when you did startups in this country. That was the time when you went for a classic job and you worked your way through the corporate ladder. And it basically meant that if you started up, you didn't get a job out of college. That was the only reason why you would. Flipkart had just started in 2008, so they were beginning to make some noise. And when we started, Second Shadi and Gaadi, they were both nice, quintessential advertising subscription businesses, but never big. We didn't raise any money, so it was a conscious call of not to do that. But this was the first test that, you know what, if you are putting your eggs in one basket, you better have a good shot at making it really big, or perhaps it may not be then worth your time and so on. And then Groupon happened in 2011, which was a terrific experience, because this was my first large company experience. Publicly listed company. You are the owner of a country and then a region as well. And I realized how terrible a leader I am. I realized I have just lucked my way through getting to that point. There is still so much to know, so much to learn. But most importantly, I learned how the Indian consumer behaves and how they're so different from what we read about when we read from the West and the literature of all startups and how to build startups and so on. So that was a great training ground for me. Those 4 years from 2011 to 2015 when I was running Groupon, I learned a lot.
Okay.
And then in 2015, we did a management buyout of the Groupon India business, made that into Nearby, raised money from Sequoia Capital, and started literally all over again. New brand, new business model, new platform, everything from scratch. And it was not an easy journey at all. We felt that we would just win it, and everything was done, your money is raised, but nearly not. It was almost as if we started from scratch. I made a lot of mistakes as a founder. And over the course of 4 years, we got to a point where we were reasonably big. We were doing about $100 million of sales a year. We were profitable. But we were not a success because we had sold a bigger dream to an investor group. And for all the right reasons, they had bought into that dream and invested with that kind of vision in mind. But when it did not unfold, it was quote unquote not a success. And that's when I figured that the fundraising game is a very 0 or 1 outcome, where either you win and you win really big, or you don't. And then you have to be okay with that.
And a lot of the times as well, you know, like Mark Cuban says, it's an obligation So, yeah.
And it may not be a financial obligation, but it's certainly a moral and an emotional obligation that you feel towards your investors, towards your employees, towards your shareholders. And that's a very, very different experience that I had than I had previously.
You know, I definitely want to delve into failure and the mistakes you've made as an entrepreneur. But first, let's talk about what you do. Your main business, I would say, is being, you know, a YouTuber or a social media star or a financial influencer, or however you want to put it. And just recently, I interviewed, you know, Nas Daily, and he was saying that not everyone who has 1 million followers makes money. So how do you make money?
So he's right there, and he's done it for so long that he knows that there are multiple ways of making money when you think about content. The easiest way, which not every platform has, but certainly YouTube has, is that you turn on your ads.
He was raving about YouTube, obviously.
Yeah, because that's a really sound platform, because it's been consistently performing for several years now. It knows its product and so on, and it's certainly very creator friendly, because you get paid for creating content because they distribute and share revenue that they would make of advertising from you. So that's the first one, but that's table stakes. That's not a lot of money, but it's like free money. You would just put out your videos and ads would run on your channel, and for every money that Google makes, you get 65% of it and they keep the rest.
Wow.
So it's a fair share that counts to you. But you need to be really big to make that amount a non-trivial amount. The second thing, which is the big one that happens, are brand collaborations. Because you're creating content, some of that content may apply to industries, brands, or products that may fit in, whether seamlessly or perhaps as a force-fit sponsorship, whichever the case may be. So you would pick and choose who you want to work with, and that is a big fillip, because a lot of brands today are rising up to the awareness that, you know what, these influencers do actually influence, or perhaps they might. So we would test them out as against a big celebrity, or perhaps spending a lot on above-the-line advertising and so on. And then you have affiliate marketing, and you can sell your products directly and so on. But I frankly did not realize, Avanne, of how big it was until I got in there. From a distance, it sounded like, yeah, this was nice. But when I got in there, I realized that it was not trivial. And if you played the game really well and you stood for something solid, there would be an affinity that you would have with the right kind of brands and how it would work out for you or not. And that exposed me to a whole new world that I wasn't aware of at all.
And now you're milking it or leveraging on that. Yeah. But recently, the finance minister, I mean, as recent as yesterday, came out and, you know, was warning against these financial influencers, because a lot of people have burnt their fingers. Do you think this is very detrimental in terms of just taking advice from anyone? Do you need to be certified? What's the advice?
I certainly believe that there should be a layer of scrutiny. That should certainly be there, and that would be there for every profession or not. But I do believe that beyond that scrutiny, people will have to make their own choices. For example, today, where do we get most of our financial advice from? We get it from quote-unquote non-experts. It will be the uncle and aunt who have done some investment in there and are like,
oh, watching E.T. now.
Yeah, I wish people were just that smart.
Yeah.
Like this is a very evolved audience that would understand the nuances, go on and do that. Most people want passive investing. And passive investing needn't be just invest in a mutual fund and leave it. It would also be, मुझे बता दो क्या करना. Just tell me what I have to do. हाँ, tip दे दो बस, right? And रातों रात पैसा दुगना हो जाएगा. So most of it is not established or credible advice, but it still appeals to us because it appeals to the greed of the human nature that we have. So a layer of scrutiny certainly is warranted, because right now it's just free flowing, right? It could be anyone
so some
saying
sort of
anything.
guidelines and
has to be there. Has to be there.
Okay. You know, speaking of investing and giving advice on that, you've been a firm believer of compounding growth. We have enough market experts on the channel, so I'm not going to grill you on that. But I just want to know, what's the approach? Because like you said, everyone's after that quick buck, that tip, you know, give me the info. What is it that you would advise, especially for young investors?
So there's this, this happened in real, I'm told. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they're catching up. They're good friends. And Bill Gates is asking Warren Buffett, hey, what are your investment thesis, which is so simple in nature. Just pick something at the right value and stay invested for a really long time. It's so simple. How come people haven't used that more often to become rich? And Warren Buffett famously says it's because, Bill, nobody wants to get rich slowly. And that's the trap. The trap is when you're in your 20s and you want to impress people, you want to show that you've arrived, you want to buy that fancy car, those fancy phones, those fancy clothes, and so on. You believe that making the fast buck is the right way to do it, but it'll never serve you in the long run. And what I say is, one, certainly don't give up your present for a potential future where dant bhi nahi honge, health bhi nahi hogi, but you will have millions of dollars. What will you do with that? So that's pointless. At the same time, don't be so flippant that you completely ignore the future when there will be a time when you will not have an income coming through and you will have major expenses still to account for. So be wise and just follow a budget. It's the simplest way that I would advise anyone to be.
But would you say, you'd invest in index funds, mutual funds? Are you looking at being selective in stocks, or?
I don't think stock picking should be anyone's job except the experts.
Okay.
Stock picking is something which is a very expert, qualified field. Most of us are not qualified to do that. We get lured in there. Please invest in index. It will give you a nice, happy one. If you want to take low risk, invest in the Nifty 50. You want to take a higher risk but still be index, invest in small cap. But just stay accounted, because there are experts whose 24/7 job is to just track that portfolio and do a good job of it.
Okay. There's a lot going on in the startup world right now, and every day we're reading headlines about layoffs, big tech saying, an exodus, mass exodus. How worrying is it? Because it was interesting that I had a conversation as well with Rani, who was talking about how a lot of money is being put into PR that generates headlines but doesn't actually generate returns. Just your thoughts.
This is a cleansing cycle. Morgan Housel, who's a brilliant finance writer and psychology of money author, he recently tweeted, and I love that. It's like every 3 to 5 years, people forget that a recession happens every 3 to 5 years. And that's the cycle. I have been in the startup world now for 15 years, and I've seen these 3 rounds of cleansing. It's brilliant when it happens, with all due respect to everyone who suffers through that, including us when we did. But this recession or this hit or focus on profitability is necessary, because it just cleanses the noise and makes the signal a lot more stronger. So you would want people to go back to the basics and say, you know what? Completely baseless revenue growth is not going to get you anywhere.
But do you think that that's what a lot of the Indian startups, maybe some of the listed ones as well, did?
17% of our unicorns are profitable. Only 17%. Why should that be the number? It shouldn't be. I don't expect 100% of them to be, because there is this gestation cycle, but it's not that these unicorns are young. They've been in that trade for a really long time. Why isn't that number 60, 70%? Because that is the number in the US. So you would want to get to a certain point where either you have good money chasing good ideas, or stop raising money to keep pumping it out to just make it more attractive.
And then these valuations, they're mind-boggling, right?
It is a very different game, because at the end of it, I say this, and this was not a popular opinion when I said it. This was at TechSparks with Shraddha. Investors are not in the business of helping businesses grow. They're in the business of entering and exiting businesses. That's their core focus and their fiduciary responsibility towards their LPs. They have to generate a return. And that return has to come through. Now, if that return comes in through higher and higher valuations, we're just tossing it up to some other investor who believes in that, that's what they're going to do, irrespective of what the fundamental strength of the business is or not. And that's why public markets are the true strength and test of it. You see public markets and a lot of internet startups that have not had a rosy journey. They may do commendably well in the future, but time will tell. But so far, it's out there. I have millions of retail investors. All of them are scrutinizing me day in and day out on how I'm performing, my guidance for the future, my financials, my balance sheet, my P&L. And if that doesn't look solid, you're not going to get my money. Simple as that, because I have options.
Now, when it comes to entrepreneurship as well, you've gone on record to say that it's not as glamorous as it looks. There's a lot that goes in behind the scenes. You're not in front of the camera just giving interviews and having talks, right? So there's a lot that goes behind it. So is there any advice that you give when it comes to being an entrepreneur? What does it really look like?
I think the only advice that I would give, Avanne, is entrepreneurship is the most brutal form of self-discovery. And when I say that, what I mean is, very often in life, we're used to life happening to us because of the school we went to or the college we went to, the grades we had, how smart we were, the family we came from, and all of that. But people don't buy products because their founders had these qualifications. Like, you haven't bought anything in the past because the founder is from IIT, or they raise a certain money, or they haven't drawn a salary for the last 6 months and you feel sorry for them. You couldn't care less.
Yeah.
You just need a product that works for you, a service that works for you, and if you have it, here's my money. If you don't, you won't.
Yeah.
And most people are not used to that. So it hits you really hard when you realize the market is the market.
Yeah.
There's nothing bigger and holier than that. And if you cater that, you will win. If you don't, you won't. And this is the biggest form of realization that most entrepreneurs are not ready for. So as you pointed out, it's not glamorous. When you show up every single day, oh, certainly not. Nowhere. This isn't entrepreneurship. It isn't that world.
Yeah.
It is the daily grind. It's showing up, listening to customers, hurling abuses at you, giving you feedback, telling you where you're going wrong, what they need better from you, and just being at it, showing up every single day.
And failing a lot of the times, and that's what I want to discuss as well. I mean, you said you made a lot of mistakes as an entrepreneur. What were some of the mistakes that you made that you'd say, you know, watch out for or don't do the same thing?
Number one, marketing cannot solve a product problem. It cannot. If your product doesn't work for the customer, marketing will not make it work. It'll, in fact, worsen it because it will just showcase how the product still doesn't work, but to a far bigger audience. Number two, you cannot have people who have done their job really well become managers if they do not know how to manage people. Just because you perform individually really well does not automatically qualify you to take charge of other people's performance.
Being a leader, you mean?
Being a leader. Like, so manager is not something that is a birthright. It's something that you earn over time, and if you don't, then it will not work. And number three, which was a positive realization from my failures, is invest in culture from day one. Your culture may not help you grow your business, but in times of shit, it will hold it together. And that is critical because, as you pointed out, you will go through a failure. It's inevitable, irrespective of how rock solid you are and what a genius you may be. You will go through a failure, and during that hard time, it will be the culture of the company and how you've treated your colleagues, your peers, your employees, which is going to hold it together or not.
Yeah, that is very important. And Ankur, you did not bring your book. We had so many requests in the office for a signed copy of Ankur's book, but that's fine. I want to understand if you could just, in a nutshell, tell us a little bit about the two books that you've written, what it's about, because it's a lot of your personal experiences.
Sure. So the first book that I wrote, Do Epic Shit, was written for people who don't read too often, which is a large share of the current generation. I have benefited a lot from books, Avanne, so I thought that if I want to write a book for people who don't read, what would that look like? And I said, where are they spending their time? They're spending most of the time on Instagram, on YouTube, on Netflix, and so on, which is consumable, swipe-up content. So can I create a book which would be like an Instagram reel? So Do Epic Shit is a book where you can start from any page at all. Just read that page and just move on, and you would still take something from it. It's not a story. It doesn't have a start, doesn't have a finish, and it's just a compilation of my thoughts that I've learned over the last 42 years of existence. When I read that book, when I wrote that book, a lot of people came back and said, hey, this provoked us, it gave us a lot of food for thought, but it kind of felt incomplete because we don't know what to do next. So can you be a little directional and prescriptive on what we could do? I says, great, let me follow it up. And that's why the second book, Get Epic Shit Done, which was more of the active voice, get it done. And it was more about 36 life questions that people often ask in their life, particularly young ones, and the answers to those questions which come from a teacher in the form of a student-teacher conversation. So the book is written as a conversation, a Q&A, where the student is just asking, like a curious student, and a teacher is trying to attempt and help the student in their journey. And it's again a book where you don't have to read the entire book. You're literally like, okay, this is the question that I'm grappling with. I open to that page, read the first 4-5 pages, get my direction hopefully, and move on. And pick the book the next time you need it.
So it's as unconventional as your journey has been.
It certainly was very different. Yes, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, now a lot of, it's interesting because your journey, you've gone through that failure, you've been through the grind, the hustle, you've failed and then you've emerged strong. But a lot of the young generation, I think they want that instant success. And you spoke about content creation as a platform. So a lot of people are looking at that avenue to really make money and make that their business. Top 3 things that you would say to make a successful content creator?
Consistency, authenticity, and listening.
But it's so tough because there's so many people doing the same thing, right? To be authentic and
So, go back to the time when COVID happened.
Yeah.
And if you recall that time, Aman, everyone was creating content.
Yeah.
Literally everyone
and
was.
their
Workshops
moms
and webinars and this and that. And I remember tweeting, it doesn't matter who's creating content right now. What matters is who will still be creating content when all of this is over. It is surprising, and I say this with absolute respect, it is surprising how easy it is to win the content game by just consistency. Nothing else. You would drop because you fear what you just said. Oh my God, there's so many people doing the same thing.
Yeah.
What value do I add? But if you just stuck it out, if you just were at it for 12, 18, 24 months, you will be surprised at how many people dropped out and you're the last one remaining or one of the few, and that would make you win. That would just make you win. But it's hard to be consistent, particularly when things are like, no, it's slow, I don't know how it's happening and so on, which is why authenticity, you have to create content on things that you are authentically passionate about. It cannot be something that you put up a facade on. It just is not possible. Like you have to be just you so that it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like, oh my God, I have to drag myself again to do this. It just needs to be, how do you do it? How do you do it? Like, oh my, how do you do this for 14 years? And you're like, you know what? Because there's a large part of me that's just authentically doing this. It doesn't feel like work, and that's why it's just happened. And that is the second one. And third is feedback. People will tell you. हमारे देश में there is zero dearth of feedback. People will always tell you what you either want to know or don't want to know. But if you were to just select and focus on the things that you are called out for, fix it, you only get better. So imagine this flywheel where you're constantly creating content, you're doing it because it's authentically you. People are telling you what you could do better, and then you're completing that loop day in and day out, day in and day out. And the next thing you know, you're far ahead of the crowd than anyone else is.
Are you investing in any companies right now or looking at any startups?
I actively invest. I actively invest.
Which could you give us some?
So the thesis for me has changed over time. I used to earlier invest very early as an angel. But I realized that that's not what I'm good at because I get very emotional. I'm driven a lot by the enthusiasm and the passion of the founder. So I may not give enough prudence to the idea, the worth of it and so on, which I feel is somewhat important as an investor.
And the financials.
And the financials. Or even a plan for that matter. You know, be like, oh, I love you. And take my money. Never a good idea. Certainly not. So I failed a lot around that. And the only money that I made was just pure luck. I couldn't attribute it to any of my intelligence or due diligence. So I moved slightly late stage. So I invest in companies which are about 30 million plus in valuation. They would be raising their first institutional round. So I know that somebody has done that hard work and I'll just freeload on that and come in there. Because what I offer is, one, my distribution that I have through my social media. I certainly have the experience of being a founder and knowing the grind, helping them with product or with the consumer demographics or certainly with the founder mindset. So they value all of that. And I feel that they've reached a stage where they would see why this is necessary as against early on when they're like, you know what, just get the product out and let's just make ourselves survive. Forget about founder mindset and forget about culture and forget about hiring the right kind of people and so on. We just make it happen. So it's the best use of my time and money. And I'm enjoying the journey a lot. I really am. And it's sector agnostic, but I get to spend time with very smart people and get to ride on their journey.
Wow, so your job is your passion and then it doesn't feel like
100%.
a job. Yeah, and you've... you know, there's also the Bollywood side. You said Shahrukh Khan, you look up to him, but for him being an entrepreneur, not an actor, what stands out? Because he has he's got a lot of charisma and he's what? So do you not like him as a Bollywood actor?
He's not the best. He has his moments. But
I beg to differ.
I'm sure, which is why I'm like, you know what, I don't want to ruffle feathers. But I certainly adore him for how he's thought of his brand and the extension of it. Like today, a large part, I would imagine, of his net worth would not be from his acting career, perhaps not even from his endorsements, but from all the things that he has started, whether it's investing in sports or it's investing in production or investing in merchandise or celeb businesses and so on. And that's a very smart way of thinking about it. I'm sure he has great minds about that, but to even have that...
that vision,
Exactly, like, because a lot of people could have been in a spot, but they aren't, and he is. And that's why I feel it's brilliant where he came from. no business cracking it in this industry,
Yeah.
no godfather, nothing whatsoever, no connection, strikes it big, works really hard, shows up every day, and now thinks of it far beyond what he was meant to do. Love that.
If I could be a superhero, my superpower would be?
That I can read people's mind.
Ah, okay. I thought you'd say something like teleport myself.
No,
just read people's
read
minds.
people's mind.
Okay. I'm on my phone X hours a day. You can't lie.
About 3.5.
Including like with
Everything.
And so like at night you consciously put your phone aside
Oh,
or
yeah,
like
yeah,
before
yeah. I have time
sleeping?
limits for almost every app that I
Oh,
use.
so it's all like
Yeah,
time limits, so you
time
don't
limit.
use.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I try. I have to do that. I'm currently binge watching.
I don't binge watch anything. I don't follow series. I only watch movies, and
No.
they just get done in 2.5 hours. I don't watch any series.
Are you 95 years old? What? Why?
I don't watch any series. It sounds like such a big commitment, and I'm like, I don't want to do
But
that.
you're watching movies.
I love watching
Okay.
movies.
Okay. Best advice that you've got.
If I can't trust you, it doesn't matter how smart you are.
Okay. The coolest account you follow on Instagram or Twitter or any social media platform?
I like this guy called Adam. He's a comic based out of the US, and he does some really wonderful scripts. I'll just like him for his authenticity.
Okay. Cracking really bad jokes. I think that's something that you
100%. I'm really bad, and I do it very often.
do it. So what's the worst?
Oh, you wouldn't want to know.
Okay.
No.
What gives you sleepless nights?
Nothing. I sleep really well.
I think it's a man thing. I'm not going to say. A book that I'd gift my friend who was, going through something emotional or was going through a tough time. Let's say that.
Either of these two. How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole Lepera. Brilliant book, but a really hard one at that. A lighter read will be Atomic Habits.
And not your book.
Not my book. Not mine.
Right, okay. Okay, and your guru or your mentor or someone you look up to?
My second book was dedicated to all the teachers who have taught me, most of whom do not know me. I learn a lot from observation. I don't have a mentor or a guru. I track people a lot, I observe a lot, and I absorb a lot.
Ah, what a Miss World answer. No, I'm kidding. Thank you so much, Ankur. It's been a pleasure having you with us. And
Thank you, Avanne.
spilling all your secrets, lots of pearls of wisdom, and I'm sure our audience has benefited a lot.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
that.
having me.
All right, with that, we're wrapping it up on this edition of Startup Central. Thanks so much for watching.
We don't